So what do you do when your partner tells you to buy no more trees? You don't buy them, you find them. Hey, this is Jelle, growing bonsai, and this is probably the biggest yet. The biggest what? The biggest mistake? The biggest risk? The biggest garden plant that I have tried to plant up. Let's see how this story started and show you what it looked like when I got it. Because it is actually a lot smaller now than when I brought it in. It is fall, and in fall it is a great time to keep an eye out for new bonsai. Look around in your neighborhood and you might be as lucky as me. This is an enormous box tree. It is about 40 years old according to the owner, and it was just dug up 2 days ago. The owner pulled it out. He didn't have space in his car to move it, so it was sitting on the roadside. I asked, can I have it? He said, yeah, sure. So I brought it home. I soaked it in water because it is completely dry. And now it's time to pull it up. In this video I'll prune this back, although there's very little foliage left. I'll clean out the root mass and I'll pop it in a grow box or in a plastic container, depending on how much effort it is to get this a lot smaller. You can see that the previous owner pruned back all of these branches very far. There's hardly any green left. It's the end of the growing season. I'm not sure what is going to make it. First thing I am going to do is seriously reduce these roots, because all these heavy roots the plant can't use, and I can't put it in a container like this. And then I will look at these main branches and see where I want to keep all of them. Now I picked up this box from a hardware store, and yeah, some gauze to put in there to see whether I can use this as a grow container. Alternatively, I have this very big pot that I could put it in. I need a bit of space, so I'm going to get the tree here and start planting up here. As you can tell, this is really a very big tree. When working with material this size, be very wary of your back, because this stuff is heavy. But more importantly, think whether you can actually handle it. Step 0, I soak the tree in water. This has been watered every hour for the last 6 or 7 hours. It's sitting in a puddle. I can't actually put it in a container because the root ball is still too big. But this allows all the finer roots that are still on the inside of this root ball to draw up water, get revigorated, and maybe that will aid in regrowing. In this case, this tree is going to be a lot smaller. This top is not needed. Now, because there's also no foliage on it, I'm not even going to ask the tree whether it wants to keep it. I'm just going to chop it back all the way here. Then the tree is a lot smaller already. Then the second step after doing that is reducing the root ball. And to be honest, only the finer roots, so this smaller stuff, is what the roots really use. This here is just for anchoring, so these can all go. So these are considerations that you have to make when you are actually looking at potting up a tree like this. Preparing a container, planting it in a container, filling it up, making sure it's secure, and then just wait. It will be another year, maybe 2, before I can do anything else to this tree but watering and waiting. So keep that in mind as well. It will take a long time to recover. So although it's a free tree, it will take a lot of effort and patience. Now, for trees that have been laying around for a little bit, after the soaking, this is what I look for. I see young root tips that are actually white. Also here I see that the roots have been rehydrated. They've swollen up, they have taken a whitish tone. So these roots, they will all die off. But on the inside I know that there is roots that are actually picking up steam. So that is a very good sign. I should not disturb these all that much. So I'm really going to work on the perimeter of this root ball, cutting back. Here as well, white roots. There, white roots. Here, white roots. So a really good sign, and it gives me the confidence that this part of the root ball can probably be all removed. However, it is important to realize this could have just been planted very deep, and this might not be the true nebari. Question is, do I care? It would be nice if I could eventually cut everything back to this level. And one day I will have a proper chainsaw, but that day is not today. With that length gone, this is much easier to handle, but still. It took 2 people to get it in the wheelbarrow. I'm not sure whether I can get it out without doing too much damage. might just have to tip over the wheelbarrow. Ow. Now if I look at the tree, this is going to stay, and then the two trunks here on the side are going to stay. This and this might remain, but only as very small trees, so I don't need the long stalks here either. When pruning back, it is of course important to not prune off any of the leftover foliage, because that helps to drive the growth of new roots. So at this stage I'm quite conservative, but a branch like this that doesn't have any roots might be shortened back. The same here, especially when it's in the way for the potting up. And this is what a root ball looks like after digging up a plant. All these dead roots or broken roots need to come off. You need to really clean this out and go back to healthy root stumps without any real broken areas in it. This can take quite a bit of time, and I hope that I will not be too slow, because it's evening already, the sun is setting. And all these long stalks here, they don't bring much. So also those, because they have dried out, I'm just going to prune back. I'm just cutting back into the old soil line. This way I know that everything that's in here has not dried out, and hopefully this will encourage new growth. The second set of big roots, after this there's no more big roots sticking out. Field soil typically is heavier than substrate, so I'm going to scratch out the root ball gently, but as much as possible, to get loads of this field soil out. You see straight away, you get here these roots with nice wide root tips. Good sign for the regrowth later on. The first 2 or 3 inches I want to empty out. This will also aid that when I later on put the substrate in, all these root tips are in the substrate, so you don't have this strict barrier between field soil and substrate. Hopefully that helps in the rerouting later on. You can hear I'm a little bit out of breath. It is a heavy stump to lug around. If you're wondering where I got this, check out Bobcat Bonsai channel, or my videos about making a root hook. This was made for me by Bobcat Bonsai. Now it's also the point that I need to start getting some water out, so that these root tips now don't dry out, of course. But not too early, because dry soil comes out a lot easier than wet soil. What you can tell here is these are the big roots that I cut off with my saw. Then there's nothing on fine roots, and then here on top there's a new level of roots. So indeed, this is the new nebari and that's the old nebari. And if we look down here, there's lots of these big roots. So if this takes and these start forming roots as well, then I can at some point probably reduce all these and just have it grow on this nebari. So basically potting it up like this. This will of course give a much wider root spread to this trunk than what you'd get if you take this as a top. Or alternatively, I can cut it flush here, if these take, and just use the finer roots as a new nebari. What else you can tell here is that most of the roots have not dried out. They're all healthy looking. There's here and there some growing tips on there. I think this will pull through if the winter doesn't get too cold and I pot it up properly. 1, 2, 3. Almost a perfect fit now. I'm using a mixture of fairly coarse pumice with pine bark, and there is a bit of diatomaceous earth in there. This has been used already for a tree and has been dried and cleaned up over summer. This is a very open substrate, and that is useful because air will very easily pass through it. Roots also need to breathe. Furthermore, I can now water at will because it will not stagnate in the pot. And that's the other thing, roots do not like to stay completely soaking wet. As said, they need oxygen. So using a very coarse open substrate is the right way to go if you're trying to replant something in fall. If you want to be more certain, however, you don't want to take this risk now, you can of course decide that you don't want to pot it up like this and you just plant it out in the ground. That might have been the more sensible route to go, but I don't have a place to put it in the ground. And to be honest, I don't want to dig it up next spring and then do this work. So I'm now just going to pour it in, work it between the roots, and I'll do that in layer by layer. So I'm not just going to fill everything, I'm just going to first fill the bottom part, add more, and then another layer of substrate, and work it between the roots. Really important to get it below the roots. I've not tied it in place yet. I'll do that before I move the tree. But right now I want to be able to wiggle the tree compared to the pot to really move that substrate between the lower roots, the big cut stems. You can of course use a chopstick or a piece of cut off wood to really wiggle this in between the roots. But I find that my fingers also work well. But yeah, you do get lots of little wounds on your hands. You can see this now doesn't sink at all because it's all the way to the bottom filled. I still have to fill it up more here, but slowly I'm getting to the point that the whole pot has been backfilled and I should start watering it again. For me this is an all or nothing. If it doesn't live, it doesn't live. Then I've put a lot of work in, but I know. And now, next year and the year after, I can just leave it in this pot. As for aftercare, as said, I'm going to still tie these up. I'm going to water it well. I'm going to fertilize it a little bit with boxwood fertilizer, which is slightly basic, so not acidic, but in the basis. That's what they prefer. They come from limestone regions typically, so adding limestone fertilizer to the pot might help the roots to recover. Besides that, it's going to go into half sun. There's not much foliage and I want to give it all the opportunity to recover, and that's about it. I'm not going to wait for spring to show you whether it recovers or not. That is another video. Very sorry, but I thought it is still full. Maybe you can still use it. It is getting really dark. I'm just going to finish off. I'm a little bit out of breath. I'm going to tie this down, water it well, and move it. This was Jelle growing bonsai with a massive boxwood. This is an unexpected little present. Yeah, let's see whether this lives.